Robert Mitchum, Big Bad Bob. Actor, singer, real-life roustabout, rogue meddler, recalcitrant felon, drug fiend, drunken pugilist, hobo, and all-round hunk. How they swooned in the aisles at the sight of him.
His chest arrives 10 minutes before he does. Just a great, big, gorgeous man.
He had a way of walking that was just pure panther. I mean, it was this sensuous kind of thing that was also a little scary. And, you know, women love danger.
A wisecrack came very easily to Mitchum. He looked believable delivering it as well. He achieved what actors want to achieve, which is, it seems like I'm making this up on the spot, doesn't it? And in some cases, I actually think he was.
There's some people that you just are riveted to, but you don't know why, you know. There's something that happens inside of you, and he was that guy.
As a kid, when I watched Mitchum on screen, it forced me to accept what my father kept telling me, that I was a poor excuse for a male, just a skinny kid writing poems and poetries for girls, that I would never be a real man in Mitchum's image. So when I heard Mitchum, that rock from which the American male was carved, that man men wanted to be, was a secret writer of poetry, I had to go find his words. And find them I did, at least some of them. This is from a poem he wrote in his early 20s.
To Jones, around the bend, the quiet pool, where waters gather deep and cool and gentle, marks the melody and echoes softly then its tune. Mark then how the stone is ever adding harmony, gentle, pleasant, mark it there forever. Softened voice to buffen the swirls.
Those who knew Mitchum personally knew something of the poet, yet not everything. Even to his grandson, the actor Bentley Mitchum, the poet and his stash of words was secret.
I became aware that he was a poet in the later years that I knew him, before he passed away. I didn't have much of an opportunity to see his poetry or read it. I understood from the family and my grandmother that he was very private about it, didn't show it to people. But I also heard that he had written much poetry.
In 1971, Mitchum appeared on American TV.
The Dick Cavett Show!
In a program entirely dedicated to Mitchum, the host attempted to draw the beast from his cave, to reveal the details of his poetic secret.
You write poetry, I know.
Yes. No, that's a canard. That's...
Well, I've seen some of it.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
I won't pull it up, but you have written. Have you not sat down and written a poem once or twice in your life?
I didn't expect it to leak out, though.
Will that hurt your image in any circles?
It's not that, no. You know, I did it sort of generally. It was sort of private, you know, and I'd throw it in the wastebasket and someone would retrieve it, you know, and blackmail me with it.
No, that's a canard. That quote never fails to make me laugh. It is Mitchum to the core. What Mitchum is really saying through using the word canard is that, yes, I am a man of literature, of words, but there's no way I'm going to admit it. And who can blame him? Mitchum grew up in a rough world during the American Depression, when to be anything less than all man was to leave himself open to attack. Oh, I'd like to claim the times have changed for young men writing poems.
I think the hard man image that you see on the screen is very much him in a lot of senses. He was very independent and very strong and very fearless in a lot of ways. But perhaps you have something there in saying that it was his way of balancing. You know, I think that all people have a soul, and it was his way of maybe expressing the softer side, and maybe that's why he didn't want people to see it, because maybe he saw that in a way as a weakness, which I think as he got older, he didn't want people to see it, because when he was younger, he was happy to put it out there much more.
In the early 1950s, Stanley Rubin produced one of the first ever movies to be filmed in CinemaScope, The River of No Return, starring Robert Mitchum and Marilyn Monroe. It's the tale of a man with a violent history His young son, who learns his father is not all he thought he was, and a meddling saloon singer. For Rubin, Mitchum was the perfect choice to play the flawed, yet considerate, father.
I think the very fact that he had the outward appearance and some of the outward mannerisms of a fairly tough guy, and yet was an actor, there's the poetic side of Mitchum being expressed through acting, even though there were mannerisms in him and even a background of life in him that were the opposite of that. So the very fact that I thought he was the perfect guy to play the man in River of No Return also expresses what you could call a poetic side. One of the reasons I wanted Marilyn in River of No Return was that combined with her great sexuality, there was her vulnerability. And Mitchum was similar. He was a man's man, and yet he had this enormous affection and yearning for the reunion with his son. Even in the nature of his relationship with his son and the way he treated his son, there was a poetic side in the character, and therefore in Mitchum.
Mitchum grew up fatherless, and it was in his mother's home city of Bridgeport in Connecticut that his poetic talents were first recognized. The city's main newspaper, the Bridgeport Post, ran a 3-column feature with photograph proclaiming the 8-year-old flat-cap-wearing, pencil-toting little Bobby Mitchum a child prodigy.
Bridgeport has produced several youthful genii within the last few years who, starting from obscure beginnings, are now well on the road to fame. The latest of the budding geniuses to shine over the literary horizon of Bridgeport is Robert Mitchum, who is blossoming out as a youthful poet of much promise. Master Robert, who is a few months over 8 years of age, has, according to his mother, developed an extraordinary taste for writing. A glance over some of the products of this youthful brain indicates that here, perhaps, is a young poet who is gifted with original ideas.
Such sudden fame would not necessarily have pleased young Robert. He was, by all accounts, a shy loner in a blue-collar, snub-nosed town. And if all the other boys knew he was a poet, he might as well have had a target on his back. Ah, such are the challenges for the artistic and creative male. Yet, at least we have a record of his early writing, and it does show promise. This war poem illustrates an incredible understanding of assonance, alliteration, rhythm, and rhyme that you just would not expect from an 8-year-old.
A war poem. Through mud and snow I wander, pulling guns to save others' lives. I fight in the mountains, yonder. I'm imprisoned in dusty dives. I seek adventure and find too much. Oh, if only I were rich. I'd not be in this terrible Dutch and fighting in this ditch.
As well as revealing an understanding of language and the musicality of words, the poem also reveals a level of unbelievably mature thought. I'm not referring to the anti-war sentiment, but to the line, I seek adventure and find too much. It's taken me almost 40 years to reach the same conclusion about my own life. Yet, continue to seek adventure Mitchum did.
When he was a little kid, like, he must have been 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there, he had disappeared from the house for the entire day. And everyone was looking everywhere for him. They thought he'd run away, he'd run off. And they called the local police, and they couldn't find him anywhere. And finally, as the sun was setting and the day was over, he came wandering back up the road towards the house. And everyone was like, oh my God, where have you been? What'd you run off? What did you do? And he just said, I wanted to see what was out there.
Mitchum's travels continued into his teens. With food and work scarce, he left home, jumped on a train, and became a hobo traveling the rails in search of the world, a job, an adventure. Far from home, he sent his mother a postcard. On it were written just 4 lines, making up one of Mitchum's most atmospheric poems.
Trouble lies in sullen pools along the road I've taken. Sightless windows stare, the empty street. No love beckons me, save that which I've forsaken. The anguish of my solitude is sweet.